Hello and welcome. Just want to say congratulations on taking the step to grab this video course. This is video number 1, the Introduction to Podcast Marketing. So what I want to do now is just to give you a quick overview of what's in this video course so you know exactly what to expect. And then once you know that, you'll be able to implement everything faster. So this, of course, is video number 1. Video number 2 is what's in a podcast. So basically, we want to make sure that you plan a successful podcast. And a successful podcast is a podcast that can engage the listener. The more you engage and the more your engagement increases, the higher the stick rate, meaning the longer the person stays listening to your podcast. And the more invested they become, the more likely they are going to buy your products or take some sort of action that you tell them to in the end. Now, writing an intro and outro actually can help your podcast. So instead of just having a podcast where you start talking about the content right away, you want to make sure that you have an intro that introduces you, that gets people into the mindset of, hey, okay, put everything down, get ready to rock and roll and learn a lot of content. And then talk about you a little bit, not really talk about you, but in the sense of, hey, so-and-so is the expert, stay tuned, blah, blah, blah. So basically introduces you to the audience and gets them all excited. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. And then, of course, outro is the ending, the call to action. So even at the end of your podcast, you could have a specific call to action, but the outro would be more of a general thing like, hey, visit my site, share it with your friends, and things like that. Now, don't worry, I'm going to show you exactly what to write step by step, word by word, so you can simply copy and paste this. Video number 4 is we're going to hire a voiceover artist for the intro and outro. Now, the reason why we want to do that is because subconsciously, this can actually help you. Subconsciously, if somebody else introduces you, like a professional voiceover artist introduces you, and then you jump right in, and then the outro is when they tell people to take action and so forth, that can actually help your podcast. So more on that later. Video number 5 is microphone and software editing tools. I'm going to show you exactly what microphones to use so you can have a high quality podcast, because unfortunately people do judge a book by its cover. So in this case, they are going to judge you by your audio quality. Now, if your content is really, really good, most likely people are going to stay till the end. But it's going to be hard if your quality is not good. So you want to make sure that your quality of your audio is really, really good. And that brings us to video number 6. We're going to talk about how to record your podcast, how to create soundproof environments, because environment is actually crucial to creating a good, high quality audio. Video number 7, we're going to edit your main podcast yourself. So I'm going to show you how to edit using editing tools, free software editing tools. Video number 8, podcast hosting sites and sites to use. So once you get your file, then what? Okay, so from that point, we're going to upload it to a podcast hosting site, which will then allow us to get the RSS feed. So I'm going to show you sites to use, different sites you can use, how to create a podcast, upload the files to the podcast hosting, get your RSS feed, and then take that RSS feed and submit it to iTunes, which then will help you get some traffic once you are approved. So this is basically how it all works. Basically, you're going to plan and record a high converting, high engagement podcast. From that point, you're going to set up your microphone, your software tools, and edit your podcast. You're going to record your podcast and edit everything like that. You're going to upload to podcast hosting. You're going to generate the RSS feed, and you're going to submit it to iTunes. Now, while this does have a lot of technical stuff in it, if you can follow me step by step, then you should really have no problem at all. So what I recommend that you do is watch it and follow along so that you're able to actually take action while you do it. So that way you'll actually feel like you're succeeding along the way, because I guarantee you if you watch it and you don't take action, then this is all just nothing. It's just wisdom. It's just knowledge that has not been put into place. So you want to make sure you put all of it into action and start getting yourself some branding and traffic. So what do you need to get started? Well, you're going to need to have audio files. Now, obviously, I'm going to show you how to do all of that, but audio files that are supported by iTunes, and we're going to submit it to iTunes. So .mp3, which is what we're going to be using, .move, .mp4, and .m4v. So these are mainly iTunes compatible. So if you submit it to somewhere else besides iTunes, that might change. But for the most part, if you stick with MP3 files, that's pretty much standard throughout the globe. You're obviously going to need an iTunes software. So if you don't have it, go ahead and go to Google, type in iTunes, and you'll be able to download it. And also you'll need to have an iTunes account. Obviously you won't be able to submit anything unless you have an iTunes account. You also want to have your cover art file that is standard and recommended by iTunes, which is 1400 by 1400 pixels, JPEG, or PNG. Now, I'm not really going to show you how to create one of these art files, but you can hire somebody to create a graphic for you if you want to, or you can do it yourself. So I'm giving you the standards of what you need. But once you've gathered all of that, then you can easily just post it all to the podcast hosting site. You're also going to need some money to hire a voiceover artist. I'm going to show you exactly sites that you can go to hire voiceover artists for low costs. You're also going to need some money to get a soundtrack, and this is what helps create an environment, whether it's fun, whether it's serious, and things like that. Soundtrack, as you know, if you're watching a movie or a video, if you put some creepy sound in there, it's going to sound creepy. If you take the same clip and put something happy, then even if it is scary, it's not going to be scary. So soundtracks are important. That's part of the whole podcast blueprint. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started and jump right in to talk about how to plan your podcast in video number 2. Hey, and welcome to video number 2, which is what's in a podcast. Now, first things first, I want to cover 2 main points before we actually jump right in and start looking at a bunch of podcasts. First and foremost, your podcast should be educational only. Never try to sell directly in your podcast. Otherwise, you will turn people off and people will most likely ignore you, close it, and leave. In this day and age, in this year and beyond, there is so much information out there that people can simply turn you off and go find another podcast. So you'll really want to only focus on education only and give as much as you can to give. Give first and then get later. That's really how you can sell nowadays. And that's how you're going to separate yourself among your competition. So while your competition is trying to sell in their podcast, and you and yourself are giving your heart out, giving great content, and in the end, people are going to be attracted to you. They are going to share your podcast with their friends, their family, and their colleagues. And that's how you can sell the most. And also, that's how you're going to brand yourself and separate yourself from your competition. So with that said, let me talk about different types of podcasts and how you can figure out the winning formula for your own podcast. Now, not all podcasts are going to have an intro and an outro. Some podcasts simply have an intro, music, and they have the same intro and outro. Now, it is my recommendation that if you do not have a brand built yet, then having an intro and outro is actually very important because you want to make sure that you stick in people's minds introduction and the outro as well. So this is about branding, and think of your podcast as a platform to brand yourself as that type of person who is going to give lots and lots of content. People are going to learn lots and lots of stuff from you, and they're going to want lots of stuff from you, your products and your services later down the road. Because in the end, the more people are engaged in your podcasts, the more they're actually listening to all of your podcasts, then the higher the stick rate is, the longer they are going to be invested in you and they're going to want more of your stuff. So that's really what the goal is here, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're a business or anything like that. And then you'll look through here and you'll find that some places, some podcasts will have introductions, but they won't have any outro. But I would say go all out. Do everything that you can do. Have an intro and have an outro, and do everything you can possibly do to create a high converting podcast, because your competition is likely not going to do all of it. They're just going to do a little bit or half of it. So what I recommend that you go ahead and do is, of course, if you don't have iTunes already, go to Google and type in iTunes, download, and go ahead and download the iTunes software. Open it up, create an account, and everything like that. From that point, then I recommend that you actually listen to podcasts that are similar in your niche, because that is who you will be competing with. Now, there are many different types of podcasts. There are video podcasts, there are audio podcasts, and more. But in this specific video series, just to keep it simple because you're learning the basics, we're going to stick with audio podcasts. So the first thing I'd recommend that you go ahead and do is click on podcasts, and then go under the all categories over here, and of course find the category that best fits your niche. So you could have business, arts, comedy, education and games and hobbies, government organizations, and more. Now, I'm going to choose business and see what I'm up against. So just by looking through here, you can have a good idea of what could be possibly working and what might not be working as much. And what I like to do is go to the what's hot section, because that will tell me what people are looking for. And look through that first and get some ideas on possibly and potential ways that I can create my own podcast. Okay, so let's just take an example here. This is Money Girl, quickanddirtytips.com. And what I like about this podcast is you can see that there are a lot of people viewing this. She does have a good amount of podcasts. So she has a lot, up in the 100 range. But if you listen to it, she actually has a really good intro. Let me go ahead and play it, and I'll show you exactly what the intro sounds like. But you'll notice a pattern, especially for the ones that are doing well, is that you don't want to have a too long of an intro. You don't want anything that is greater than 30 seconds. You want something that is less than 30 seconds. But it's intriguing, it's interesting, because it drills it into people's minds. So let me go ahead and play this, and we're just going to listen to the first 30 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and play.
Author of the award-winning book, Money Girl, Smart Moves to Grow Rich. In addition to the weekly show, I also write a free newsletter to give you more money tips that are not in the podcast. So be sure to sign up at quickanddirtytips.com. And while you're there, connect with me on social media, subscribe to the podcast through iTunes, or read a transcript of this show, which is episode number 350, called What is the Self-Employment Tax? Working for yourself.
Okay, so I paused the video, and as you can see, she went all the way to about 32 seconds of an intro. She introduced herself, and you can do that if you want to, but I would say if you can get a voiceover artist to do it for you, then if you think about it, it's kind of like getting somebody else to introduce you versus you introducing yourself. So, I mean, you can get somebody else to talk about you. If that's the case, that actually positions you more of an expert than you talking about yourself. So, for example, you get up on stage, you're about to talk to an audience, and then the guy who introduces you merely says, "Hey, this is so-and-so," kind of in a monotone voice, not really excited or anything like that. And the audience doesn't really know you. If that's the case, think about that. If you're in the audience, you're going to probably think, this guy's probably not that interesting. But if the guy sounds really, really excited, he's really excited about you, and introduces you and positions you as the expert, then guess what? The audience is going to feed off of that energy and think, wow, okay, something's up. There must be a reason why this guy is so excited. I want to know. So you see what I'm saying? That's why an introduction is so important. So I highly recommend that you go through these and just listen to podcasts in your niche and see what they're talking about, see how they talk and things like that. Don't worry if you feel like you can't speak in terms of voice, because a lot of people don't want to do a podcast because they're afraid of their voice and things like that. Because if you are, I would actually recommend that you do a search on YouTube for a guy named Roger Love. Roger Love is a voice-over and voice coaching coach for people like Tony Robbins, Susie Orman, and people like that. But I can guarantee you'll learn a lot just by listening to his YouTube videos. In fact, I myself have studied and purchased a lot of his products, and I have to say it works really, really well. So everybody has a hidden voice. You just got to find it. You just got to get some guidance from the right people. So you can actually go to YouTube and find him. He has a website, join his newsletter, and you'll actually get a lot of free stuff that actually works. So in that area, I highly recommend Roger Love as somebody to go to in terms of his content. And you really don't need to hire him. One-on-one coaching, that can get expensive. You can do that if you want, but I just want to give you a free route that has helped me, and I know it can help you as well. Now, going back over here, let's take a look at a few other ones. We can click on See All. And what I recommend you do is just go through these. Don't really listen to all of them, just listen to a handful and specifically find ones that are related to your niche. And that way, if you have, you find somebody who has a big subscriber base and not necessarily follow them, but get an idea of what people are looking for. So that's what you're really looking for, is what are people looking for? And how can you replicate that to create that as a podcast? So that's pretty much this little specific method that I use to do a little bit of research. So with that said, let's move on to video number 3. Hello and welcome back. Let's talk about the intro, writing the outro, and finding a soundtrack. The introduction sets the tone. In other words, it helps the listener decide for themselves whether they want to stay and listen to the rest of your podcast or leave right away. So you'll want to make sure that you set the tone in a correct manner. So what is a correct manner? Well, the correct manner is knowing your audience and how can you relate to your audience. And that's crucial. So you want to make sure that whether it's your voice or whether it's somebody else's voice, that you can relate to your demographics. So you really need to know who your audience is. Is it mainly male? Is it mainly female? Is it mainly teenagers, kids, whoever? Older, seniors, grandfathers, grandmas, fathers, wives, husbands, different types of careers, and things like that. So if you can relate to the person right away and show them that you've experienced what they're experiencing, or you can help them in such a way, they are likely to stay. You don't want to sell just yet. There are a lot of podcasts out there that will say, hey, come visit my site right away. People don't care about that in reality. And yes, it might work in some situations, but people, what they care about is how you're going to solve their problems. If you solve their problems, they're going to naturally want to know more about you. So I recommend don't sell yet. You can tell a little bit about you and your sites, but don't sell yet. Try to provide as much content, or show that you are about to provide content first and foremost. And the goal is also to get people into the right mindset before they begin to listen to your podcast. If you can get them into the right frame of mind, then you can actually create a high converting podcast and a high engagement podcast before you even ever have gotten started. So that's the beauty of an intro. Now, let me show you exactly what you can do to begin writing it. So I've split this up into parts. What you can say is relating. So the first part, we relate to the person. The second part, we try to remove as many distractions so that we can get them into the right mindset so that they can focus. Then the third thing is going to be the purpose or the benefits. Basically, what you're going to teach. Or if it's a general thing and you don't want to change your intro too many times, you want to have a general benefit. And then, of course, the last thing is going to position you as the expert. So kind of like I talked about earlier, you're about to get on stage and somebody introduces you. They're all excited. They introduce you as the expert. Then the audience is focused and interested in listening to you. But if it's done incorrectly, then, and they don't really know you, then guess what? The intro may actually hurt you. So let's talk about relating. You can get a voiceover artist that can relate to the demographics. Say something like this: podcasting from his or her, that's you. So if you're a male, it'll be his. If you're a female, it'll be her. Where? Your office, your room, your location, where? Now, I want you to think about this. Don't just pick one. Pick one that actually relates to your demographics. So if your demographics, and you know your demographics is on the go or wherever, then you can do something that might relate to them. So if your audience tends to be in the office a lot, hey, pick the office. Or pick an area where they want to be. So maybe you could do a podcast on the side of a beach or something. Obviously, you want to be truthful, but you want to pick a location where you're actually doing the podcast. But pick a place that makes them feel relaxed. So you can say office, room, location, where, your car even. It can be anywhere. So basically, where somebody wants to be. Then from your city, state, country. You can be city, state, you can do state, country, or just state or country. It's up to you. Just location, just makes it more personable. Then remove distractions. Grab a cup of coffee, glass of water, something relaxing, grab a pen and paper. Basically get them in the frame of mind of, okay, this is what I want you to do. Grab something that is enjoyable, because this is going to be enjoyable. And then think about distractions. Put away distractions. What distractions? focus on your demographics. Do your demographics have children? Maybe say something like, okay, put the kids to bed. Maybe your demographics don't have a lot of, children. Maybe they're mainly working a lot. Maybe they don't have children, or maybe they're a single parent, maybe whoever. Basically focus on your demographics, because this is a great way to relate to them. So put away the distractions, list the distractions. Not too many, just put one sentence or two sentences, or just a few words. Then the purpose. You can say, get ready to learn how to blank. And this will be the main benefit of your whole podcast. So in this case, you're learning to create a podcast. So if I was making a podcast about how to learn how to create a podcast, I would say, get ready to learn how to create a podcast that will do what? Because the podcast needs to do something, right? The end result is that it's going to brand you as an expert and bring you sales. So that's what I'm going to put, right? So that's an opportunity to put the benefit. And then the last thing is going to position you as the expert. Now, here is your host for blank. That's going to be your company name. Not your name, but your company name or your podcast name. Basically what you're going to put up on iTunes. So that's going to rebrand you. And then, of course, you can also position yourself as the expert. So your expertise, I could say podcast expert, and then your first name, and then of course your last name. So you can pause this, copy this if you want to. I'm going to go through really quick, and I'm just going to write this out for you. All right. So I'm going to paste this here. Let's start with this here. Okay, I'm going to remove relate and say podcasting from his, let's say, I could say from his office, I could say from the lake, I could say from the something else, but just don't think too much about it. We're just going to say country, so United States. And we could be more specific. We could say something like California or Atlanta or something, California. I'm just making stuff up as I go. From his office from California. Grab a cup of coffee as usual, and pen and paper, and okay, so let's say for example my demographics, they tend to be really busy. They have their iPhones on them a lot, so I can say put away your mobile phones and focus on my demographics. Mobile phones, grab a cup of coffee, a pen and paper, and put away your mobile phones. And when I write scripts for voiceover scripts, I like to break things up so that when the voiceover artist is reading it, they emphasize things in the beginning. So I tend to put like verbs in the beginning and break them up. And get ready to learn how to create a podcast that'll brand you as the expert and bring you sales. Now here's your host for, we'll just call this Podcast Masters. And here's marketing expert John Smith. Since John Smith is always being used, use Pocahontas with that, just John Smith. No, I'll just use John Smith. So John Smith, and that'll be our intro. So usually I'll leave it like that. And I'll just say final intro. And usually I will do something like this. Just make it easier to read for the voiceover artist. So just read through it, make sure it sounds good, and we're good to go. Now, the outro, on the other hand, is going to be like this. So let me run through it really quick. The outro, basically the purpose is to get people to share your podcast, get them to listen to your other podcasts, and get them to your website. So people like to be shown appreciation. So you can say, thanks for listening to your podcast. So whatever that might be. So in this case, we could say something like Podcast Master. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this over so I can show you as an example. So thanks for listening to your podcast name, first and last name, call to action. Tell people to do what? Share the podcast with your friends and families and colleagues. Go to yourdomain.com, which is going to be your domain. And then, of course, point to your other podcasts. Make sure to check out the location of your podcasts. Tell them specifically where it's going to be as well. Now, this is an opportunity to get them to listen to your other podcasts or to get them to your site. You don't have to do what I'm doing, but I'm just giving you some information on how to, get them to take action. So normally with this formula and blueprint, if they really enjoy your podcast, then they're probably going to want to check out your other podcasts. That's going to be natural. You rather have people that are interested in your stuff to come to your site rather than people that are not interested. And that's why I'd recommend that you put it at the very end. Now, in terms of the length of your podcast, you shouldn't go too long. Go look up some podcasts and see how long they are to get an idea of your niche and what people are looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and fill these in. So thanks for listening to Podcast Masters or Marketing Masters, whatever, with John Smith. So the voiceover actor person is obviously going to say something like, thanks for listening to Podcast Masters with John Smith. Enjoyed this podcast? If so, we hope you will share our address at www.yourdomain.com to your family, friends, and colleagues. And then, of course, you can say, make sure to check out, you can say the specific section or www.yourdomain.com/podcast for more podcasts. We look forward to sharing with you another session of Podcast Masters. So you can change it up. You can tell them to fill out a form. You can tell them to fill out a squeeze page, because at the very end, they have trusted you. They have trusted you enough to basically listen to your whole podcast. So that's pretty much it. You don't want it to be too long, just a couple of sentences, and that's it. Now let's talk about soundtracks. How can you go about finding places to get professional looking soundtracks? Well, there is one particular site. It's called audiojungle.net. And I personally use this, so I can recommend that Audio Jungle is a great site for high quality music. Now, you're not looking for something too long. You're looking for something that's probably about the size of your audio. So you could wait till you actually get the finalized intro and outro so you have an idea of what to include. But what you could do is once you have the intro and outro, you can go to Audio Jungle and find a audio clip that is the same size as the intro and outro. Generally speaking, you want to have it less than 30 seconds, no more than 30 seconds. Otherwise, it's too long, you're going to lose people's attention, and they're simply going to leave your site. So logos and indents are generally the ones that you're looking for. So we're going to go here, and you can actually look for specific soundtracks that may portray different feels. So demographic wise, if you know your audience, then obviously you're going to know what kind of music they may like and might be popular in their day and age, and basically something that they can relate to. Do you want them to be in a fun environment? Do you want them to be in a more serious environment? You know, stuff like banjos, children's music actually are good logo indents. It's actually quite interesting. But children's music, because it actually brings people back to their positive, happy-go-lucky type music. Let's just listen to a few. All right, so let's play that again. So you could have that. You could have something like positive, happy. Or you could have something more serious. In fact, if you go to music and you go under here, you can actually see all the different categories. You can look for, motivational music, serious business music. In fact, I can type that in right now, like corporate logos and indents. So it really depends on your voiceover. So for example, if your voiceover is really, really fast, you might want to get something like, really, really fast. Not necessarily a rock and roll, but something of that tune. If it's slower, then obviously you want to choose something that might be slower and more peaceful and impactful. So definitely try it out. Go to audiojungle.net. Let your family, friends, colleagues give you some ideas about, okay, does this sound good? Does this sound good? I would definitely pick something, but also talk to somebody also in your demographics to see what they think as well. Because if you think about it, once you have set, then you want to stick with it. So that's it. Let's move on in the next video. So once you're done writing your intro and outro, it's time to look for a voiceover artist. Now, there are many different places you can look for a voiceover artist, but the first thing you need to think about is who is your demographics. Is it a mainly female audience or mainly male audience, or maybe a young audience, maybe an older audience? That really can impact who you choose as a voiceover artist. You don't just go out there and just pick a random person. You want to make sure that you choose somebody who can introduce you, but can also be a voice that relates to that specific audience. Now, there are two different sites that I would recommend that you start out with. You can use other sites, but these sites tend to be fairly cheap, but you can also find good, high quality people to do work for you. Now, as you saw, the intro and outro, it's not too long, but some voiceover artists will charge you in terms of how many words. So just pay close attention to that so you know your budget as well. But if you go to a site called Fiverr.com, that's Fiverr.com, and you go up on the search box here and type in voiceover artist. And what I like to do is sometimes you'll see all these boxes, but you can actually change the view. I click on this one here, so that way I can see the ratings and the votes as well. So I can see how people have rated these people. Now, I like to sort it by high rating because I want to make sure that I have access to the best. So, as you can see, female British voiceover. If your audience is mainly from the UK, you want to make sure that you maybe choose somebody from the UK or Australia or United States and so forth. So that's why demographics and knowing your demographics and knowing your audience is so important. So let's say, for example, that I want to choose a voiceover, let's say male United States, to introduce me. So what I need to do is, in this case, I will look specifically for United States and male. So it says deliver your pro voiceover in 12 hours or sooner. That's really fast, so that's good. I found most of these voiceover artists will deliver fairly quickly. And another thing is, if I don't want to sift through everybody, I can just type in my demographic. So I can say male, United States, voiceover. And I can remove the artist as such. And what I like to do is just open up as many windows as I can, because right now I'm specifically in the mode of trying to find voiceover artists, and I'm going to actually listen to them and see if I can find somebody who fits my demographics but also can relate to my demographics. So we're going to do that. Let's see here. I like to look at the feedback to see how other people have thought of the seller. Now, Fiverr.com is nice because it's only $5. But sometimes if you have more words, it'll cost you a little more money. So I'd recommend just going through, listen to all of them. If you have questions, I would recommend that you contact. You just have to log in to contact each person. But you can actually see the day on average that they deliver and the orders in queue. So from what I see, most of these are about a day to 3 days. And this guy here is 12 hours or sooner, which is actually very, very fast. So that's one site that you can use to find voiceover artists. Another site is called Voice Bunny. So that's voicebunny.com. And if you go here, you can actually find people for fairly cheap. And if you click on search our voice pool, you can see that you get deliveries between 24 to 48 hours. And what I like about this is you can actually choose. So see the price right away, the length of your project. So let's say, for example, that I have about 30 words. And I want somebody who is English, North American. And what I like about this is, you see this, you have so many different types of voices, so many different languages. It's a lot bigger than Fiverr.com. So Fiverr.com is limited in a manner, but you can find North American, any purpose. You can have different types of purposes, different types and different ways people talk. So I have a podcast, so all I need to do is choose podcast. You can do any age and gender. So I could get somebody maybe demographic wise that could relate to the person. If my demographics happen to be 40 to 65 male, I can choose that. And I got about 20 results found. So prices are a little bit more than Fiverr.com, but I mean, to be honest, these are pretty low at the same time. But you can actually see response speed. So basically how fast they will get the work done. And you can go through and listen to them. and find one that you like, and of course book this voice, and within 48 to about 24 to 48 hours you should have your audio clip. So once you have your intros and your outros and you've gotten your soundtrack, then you can always put it together, which I'll show you in the future. So let's move on to the next video. Hey, and welcome to video number 5. We're going to talk about microphones that you can use, how to set up all the hardware and software that you can use as well. We'll recommend a few softwares to use, and I'll also recommend some free softwares that you can use as well. Let's start by talking about microphones and hardware. Having a really good microphone can actually be the difference between your audio sounding really good and really bad. What I recommend that you look for, if you go on Amazon.com, or you can go on eBay or any other site, you're basically looking for a microphone that is a condenser USB microphone or a condenser microphone. It doesn't necessarily have to be a USB microphone. In fact, I'd recommend personally, in fact, right now I am using the Audio-Technica AT2020 XLR microphone. I'm not using the USB microphone, I'm using the XLR microphone. In fact, if I go up here and type in Audio-Technica or AT2020 XLR, that's actually what I'm using. I'm not using the USB version. The reason why is because I'm actually having a setup where I connect my microphone, the XLR, which is like this 3-prong looking wire, connecting to what we call a Blue Microphones Icicle. It converts a XLR to a USB mic. Now, the reason why I like this is because this little knob here can actually control what we call gain. Now, it also controls basically how your audio sounds as well. So I prefer to use this, but that's just my setup. Now, AT2020 is good. You can use a USB if you want to. I'm not saying not to, but that's what I use, and that's what has worked really well for me. I have used USB-based microphones in the past, and it's been okay. I can't necessarily say it's going to be good for the future, but generally speaking, if you have some sort of XLR mic, you can turn any XLR mic into USB by using this. And of course, you have that little feature that allows you to use phantom power. And phantom power basically allows it to power the XLR mic. But with this specific device, you can also do a lot more. In fact, as you can see, you have studio quality preamp, fully balanced, low noise analog. Now, you don't really need to know what that means. It just makes it sound a lot better versus just having merely a USB plugged directly into your computer. Now, there are several different types of AT Audio-Technica condenser microphones. There is one AT2035, and there's another one out there as well. But I recommend if you're starting out with a budget, just start out with the AT2020. As you can see, it's only $50. And once you have it, you have it. And you can create tons of podcasts, you can create videos, and more. Now, what I recommend that you do is get the package right here. Or in this case, get the package here, which is $87. It's a lot cheaper than the other price. Now, the reason why I say get the package is because you're going to need to have a pop filter. Now, when I say pop, an S, and you don't have a pop filter and you talk directly into the microphone, what's going to happen is you're going to have tons of spikes. So it's going to make your editing life a nightmare. So you're going to want to have a pop filter here. The stand makes your life a lot easier as well. That way, it's not sitting on your desk, and as you type or do things on your desk, it doesn't absorb the sound. So in fact, right now I have a stand, and the stand is connected to a pop filter, which is connected to a spider mount. And you can also find that under here. But that's pretty much the setup that I recommend. If you want to start low and you're on a budget, I recommend just starting with a condenser microphone, a pop filter. You don't have to have a stand, but it makes your sound actually sounds a lot better because you're not, it doesn't matter if you punch the desk like I'm doing now, you barely hear it. So that's the setup that I have, and that's recommended. You can always contact somebody on sweetwater.com. Sweetwater is a good site to go to. They actually have people that you can talk to. So you can actually call in and ask people different types of setups, what they recommend, things that you need, and so forth. I've actually talked to several people at Sweetwater, and they're very, very helpful. Very, very knowledgeable about this area. So you can use this site, call them up, gain more knowledge if you're stuck, and you can tell them, hey, this is my budget. Can you help me out? What can I get within this budget? Because you don't have to use the AT2020 condenser mic if you don't want to. There are other mics out there that are cheaper. Just keep in mind the quality in the end. Now let's talk about editing softwares. In terms of editing softwares, I actually use Camtasia Studio, which is a video editing software, but I also use it for audio recording as well. Simply because it's just ways to remove room noise, which is crucial to making your audio sound good. So, for example, if you notice you hear some podcasts where there's like this static in the back, that's because they haven't actually removed the audio. Now, if you want to stay on the free side, which I'm going to stick with in this video course, to lower your budgets and lower your costs as much as possible, I'm going to be using a free program called Audacity. So if you go to, up at the top here, audacity.sourceforge.net, you'll be able to download this free software. So you can download it for Windows here. If you click on download here, you can also download it for Macs and Linux. It's not only compatible to Windows, it's also compatible with Macs and Linux. So go ahead and click on download it for your operating system so that you're ready to go and as we begin to use it. Okay, so let's talk about the fun part. Let's talk about how to create a soundproof environment when you're recording. We'll talk about the podcast itself, so you can get some ideas on how to create your podcast and some super easy steps. And I'm going to show you how to record with Audacity. And this is Audacity right here. So let's jump right in. So earlier on, you saw this picture of this soundproof room. Now, obviously, creating a soundproof room, as you can see here, is going to cost you $2, $3, $4, or $5, or even $10,000. So ideally, most of you are not going to have that type of money to invest unless you're really, really serious about, doing drums, doing music, and things like that. And I have to admit, I don't have even one piece of this equipment in my house, but I'm able to create high quality video simply because I have the microphone, I have the editing software, and that's important. But you also need to have a way to absorb the sound. Like, for example, right now I am in a house that has hardwood floors. If you're aware of being in a hardware floor, house in a room that has nothing, just hardware floors, you know that there is an echo that is created. So you might be in a similar situation where you don't really have carpet. I will say if you have carpet, you have curtains, other things that will absorb the sound, generally speaking, your sound is going to be not as echoey. So obviously we want to get rid of that echo sound, right? So what I do is I'd recommend go to a room that has rugs, that has a bed. In fact, recording right outside in the room, in my bedroom, was actually the ideal place. Now, if you have sofas and other things like curtains that block your windows, that helps a lot in terms of absorbing the sound. Now, let's say, for example, that you do have a really noisy neighbor and you really can't get out of the noisiness. You're in an apartment and it's noisy. Then you're obviously going to have to find another solution. The last solution, which I would say is the last thing, is your car. Most people don't really think of your car as being a place that is more soundproof. Obviously, you're going to have to drive to a location that's a little bit more quieter, or you're going to have to find a friend who has a office that you could borrow that has carpet, it's quiet, and things like that. Now, having a good microphone is key too. If you have a condenser microphone, you can actually lessen the amount of sound, so that meaning the louder you talk, it only picks up a certain amount of sound. So that way it doesn't really pick up the sound around you. It only picks up a certain direction. For example, cardioid microphones. There's different types of microphones that will only pick up at a certain direction. So even if you have somebody next door to you that is annoying the crap out of you and is loud, it's okay, because that specific microphone will only pick up certain sounds. Now, higher pitched sounds it will pick up, lower pitched sounds it may not pick as much. But that's just a great way to create a soundproof environment, is to use materials that you already have, like sofas, beds, and things like that, rugs, to absorb the sound. Now let's talk about the podcast itself, because I want to get into this. Before we actually record our podcast, I want you to understand, okay, you've done your research in video number 2, and you figured out podcasts are similar to your niche and gotten some ideas from that. But a great way to create a podcast itself in a super fast amount of time is to think about question and answer time. So state the problem first. Think about a list of questions so that you focus. You don't want the podcast to be too long. You don't want it to be, over 15 or 20 minutes or too long, because people have attention spans. People have a short attention span and they have a limited amount of time. So because of that, you want to put it into bite-sized chunks. It's better to have like a 2 to 3, 4, or max 5-minute podcast than have something like 10 minutes or 20 minutes, right? Because otherwise they're going to want more. So that's kind of a strategy that you can use. So I'd say create a list of 2 to 3 questions and state the question in a problem first in the form of a question. Then answer that, elaborate on that, give examples of answers in real life. Then obviously see what other successful podcasts are doing. So get ideas from that, so that way you don't reinvent the wheel. But like I said, don't record too long. Be concise, be straightforward, answer the question. Don't go on rants and ramble on and on and on, because you'd be surprised. 5 minutes can come fairly fast. In fact, right now is about the 6-minute mark. Now let me talk about recording with Audacity. So let's jump right over to Audacity. If you haven't downloaded that yet, I show you exactly where to get that in the first video. Otherwise, go to Google, type in Audacity, as you can see here, and it's free. So with Audacity, and you set up your microphone and everything like that, that should be set up. So when you click the record button, you should be able to go ahead and record it. Now, with the intros and the outros done by a voiceover artist, all you have to do now is simply record your podcast. So what I want to do now is simply show you how to use Audacity to record a podcast. So the first thing I would do is, okay, you create a list of questions. Say, for example, this specific podcast, I'm going to show or talk about why you should create a podcast. So as you can see, all you have to do is click on this button here. Now, before we click on that, I would highly recommend that you wait 5 seconds, because here is a strategy. When you record, always wait the first 5 seconds, because you want to record the room noise, the air conditioner's on, things like that, some sort of consistent noise. Because when you remove that noise and you basically remove it throughout the whole track, you will remove that first 5 seconds of noise. So here we go. Okay, so I paused it. So you got pause, play, stop, and record. Now the beauty of Audacity is you can record a track, and once you get your intro and outro, you can simply place that underneath. So it's a multi-track system. So when we're done, I can click on pause. Ever wanted to create a podcast and learn how to instantly brand yourself and instantly drive tons of traffic to your podcast, which therefore you can then sell your other products and services? So if I click on stop there, you can actually see that we have created the audio here. Now, if I click on home, I can go back to home and I can click play. Now, I'm not going to show you how to edit it right now. I'm going to show you that in the next video, but I wanted to make sure you understand the basics on how to use Audacity. So as you can see, not really hard to use at all. You can increase the output volume here, which is the volume that you hear, and then the input volume here, which is the microphone itself. So if I click here, I can actually play. Ever wanted to create a podcast and learn how to instantly brand yourself and instantly drive tons of traffic? So you can do that. You can start out by introducing yourself. It's up to you. Because you have the intro of the person introducing yourself, then you can pretty much get started and talk about the podcast, talk about the content right away. So let's move on to the next video, and I'm going to show you how to use Audacity further and edit it further. Hey, and welcome back. In this specific video, I want to show you basically how to edit your audio files within Audacity. So right now, what I have is an audio file that I have opened up, and it's an audio file that deals with a specific topic of removing distractions out of your life. And this particular audio file talks about how to find your personality. Now, here's what you're going to do. As an example, I want to basically walk you through step by step on how to effectively use the Audacity tool. And then I'm going to show you basically how to edit it and how to add the intro, how to add the outro, and of course, how to add the soundtrack. Now, the beauty of Audacity is that it is a multi-track editor. So you can add as many tracks as you want. Now, remember in the previous video where I talked about recording the first 5 seconds of white noise or the room noise? Well, there is a reason why you're going to need that, and I'm going to show you right now. Now, before we actually jump right into that, let me give you a quick overview of Audacity. So with Audacity, you can play it, you can pause it, you can stop it, you can rewind it, skip it to the left, skip it to the end, and then of course you can record it. Now, over here is the volume. Of course, the volume in terms of the output volume. The input volume, or the microphone, is defined right here. So this is how loud it is in terms of your microphone. Now, you're able to zoom in and out with these two buttons. So you can zoom out and you can zoom in. Another tool that you'll likely use a lot is this specific time shift tool. If you click it, this will allow you to move the audio track back and forth. So let's say, for example, I need 10 seconds of time for the outro or the intro. And then for the outro, I need a certain amount of space. So what I normally do is just dump all the intros, outros, podcasts, and the soundtrack all within Audacity. And once it's in there, I can move things around very, very easily. Now, you can easily delete certain things. So for example, if I highlight and I click on delete on my keyboard, it'll delete that section. So you can delete areas. For example, I could delete half of this and it would delete that part. So it would allow me to delete certain portions of the audio file that I'm dealing with right now. Now, you can also apply certain things to it. So, for example, I could apply, like highlight all this with my mouse. And if you click on effect, you have many different effects here. So you can remove noise right here to remove room noise. You can amplify it or increase the sound. You can increase the bass, the treble, the pitch, the speed, the tempo, the echo, if you have any, and more. Now, a lot of these have to do with music, not necessarily, but most of the time, like the wah wah and things like that. Most of the time, you're going to be using a few of these, like amplify, fade in, fade out. So I can make this right here fade in, so that way it's quiet and it increases. And I can make this fade out, you see? But you have to highlight the portion where you want it to the effect to happen. So you got fade in, fade out, noise removal, which is something that you'll most likely use. And you have other things like that. Now, noise removal, assuming you have taken, let's say, the first 5 seconds for the room noise, what you have to do is, all you have to do is just select that area. And I think I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it better here. But once you have selected that area, click on noise removal, and then you can get noise profile. After you have done that, go back to noise removal, and you can adjust the settings and click on preview to make sure that's what you want. And when you're ready, simply click OK. All right, so you'll notice right here that the audio and the volume is too low. So what I can do here is just highlight everything. I just clicked on Control A or Select All, so you can go Edit, Select All. But once you have done that, I can go to Effect and Amplify, and I can actually increase the dB. So right now it's at this point, so I can increase it here. Now, before you apply anything, a lot of times you'll see preview, which will allow you to preview it before you actually make the changes. Okay, so that's still low. I'm going to increase that here. And click OK.
Talking about how to find out your personality.
Okay, so that worked out just like I wanted it to. And you can actually edit, delete. You can select certain areas and just click on delete, and it'll actually delete it. Now what I want to do is just show you how to edit and add the intro and outro and the soundtrack. So with Audacity, it's really easy. All you have to do is simply drag and drop the file into here. So this can be our soundtrack right here. So I can drag and drop it in. And as you can see, that would be our soundtrack. Now, or that could be an intro or soundtrack. So let's say, for example, I want to make this right here my intro. And then I can make this right here my soundtrack. If I were to do that, all I need to do is select this time shift tool, and then what I need to do is move it to a section where I want it to play. So let's say, for example, that right here, this is my intro. If that's my intro, and then this is my actual podcast, and then of course this is my soundtrack. Now soundtrack, generally speaking, you want to make it so that it is longer. And then of course, let's say that this right here is my outro. Now obviously you want to make sure that outro is here and over here. And you will notice that with Audacity, when you move it over here, you'll see a yellow line. That yellow line means that it aligns up straight with this. That way you don't have to guess, does it actually line up or not? So we got our intro, our podcast, our soundtrack. Generally speaking, soundtracks should be the same length as the podcast itself. And then of course you have the outro here. Now you don't have to do the soundtrack throughout. I will say that you want to make sure you have your podcast is louder than your music. So your music should be a lot less. So let's say this is our podcast for a minute. The audio should be about 1/10 of the size. So you don't want it to be too large in itself. So that's really how to use Audacity. There are other options, as you can see here, but these are the main ones that you can use. And of course, you can always change your microphone being this, and your speaker. So you can always change your speaker. And for some of you, you might have several microphones. You might have the computer microphone and the actual condenser microphone. So if it's not picking up and you're testing it, just click on this drop down menu here, and you're going to be able to see the different options here. Generally speaking, you'll see 2 stereo and 1 mono. I generally stick with 2 stereo, and that's it. Now, after you have listened to it and you're happy with everything and you're good to go, what you need to do now is export the file as an MP3 file. To do that, all you need to do is listen to it. If you're good to go, click on File at the very top, click on Export, and then down in the Save as Type drop-down menu, click on MP3 Files, and click on Save. So it says, warning, your tracks will be mixed down to 2 stereo channels in the exported file. Click OK. And you can add, of course, the artist name, which is your name, obviously. Track title, you can do specific podcast titles if you want, and so forth. It's not required. But once you're done, click on OK. And I wanted to make sure I got this error message, but basically what it's looking for is the lame_encoder.dll file. This will allow you to create MP3 files. So all you need to do is click on download, and this is basically the file that you're gonna need for Audacity. So what you need to do is, it says go to this page, click on Windows Downloads, click this file here. It's a .exe file. So it's an executable. If you're using a Mac or anything else, download these files here. And of course, once you're done downloading the file, what you need to do is install it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And once you're done installing that, all you have to do is go back here and click on Export, choose MP3 files, click on Save, click OK, and there we go. So now it's exporting the entire file as 128 kbps, which is a high quality MP3 file. And it's going to only take maybe about a minute, and then we'll be good to go. So I'm going to move on to the next video, and we're going to start uploading, talking about podcast hosting, and of course then later down I'm going to show you how to upload to the podcast host, and of course ultimately we're almost there to submit it to iTunes in just a few videos. There are many different sites that you can use to host your podcast. Now the reason why you want to go down this route is it's just going to make your life a lot easier in the long run, simply because when you upload to these podcast sites and hosting podcast sites, they will actually host it and they will actually generate a RSS feed for you so that you don't have to. It just makes your life a lot easier. There are many different sites, but we can recommend one particular one called Podomatic. That's Podomatic.com. If you go to Podomatic, you can actually create a free account. They have pro level accounts, but the free level account is just good as well. But you can also add tracking and other things like that if you want to go pro. Now the free account, as you can see, the current usage allows you to have about 500 megabytes of files. That means you have 500 megabytes of audio files. Bandwidth is the amount of visitors who listen to your podcasts. So obviously 15 gigabytes is a good amount, but 15 gigabytes can go fairly quick as well. But this is just a great way to start out and test how well your podcast is going to go. Obviously, when your podcast grows, then you can grow your account as well. There are other sites out there like podbean.com, which is cheap. It's not free, but it's fairly cheap. It's $3 to begin. You have 100 gigabytes of monthly bandwidth. In my opinion, that's actually fairly cheap, but you only get 100 megabytes of monthly storage. So as you saw with Podomatic, you get 500 megabytes, so it's a lot more, but you do get a lot more bandwidth. The bandwidth is actually when you got 100 gigabytes, that's a lot, and unmetered means unlimited. So that means you can have 300 megabytes, which I will admit that doesn't really, 100 megabytes is a good amount already. Generally speaking, one audio file is about generally 2 to 3 to 5 megabytes. So even with the $3 amount, you have a good amount of space, or 300 amount, you have a good amount of space. So Podbean is another great site to go to. You can also go to Google and type in podcast hosting. Now, before you actually jump on, I'd actually find some and do your due diligence. Do some research on the podcast companies before you actually jump on it, and see what other podcast people are saying. But I definitely recommend that you try out Podomatic first, because that's what we're going to be using in this video series. Okay, welcome back. We're going to be using Podomatic, and we're going to be using the free level. Now, you can always go pro if you want to upgrade and get all these other tracking goodies and everything like that. But I'd advise you to just start out with the free level when you're getting first started. Now, if you log into your Podomatic account, which is free, what you need to do is click on Publish, or put your mouse over, and you're going to see Podcast. That's what you want. There are two different versions here. You can do a quick post, or if you click on Create, you'll go to this tab right here, where you'll be able to add the episode 1, your description, and you can add the audio file, the photo, the tags, and review and publish. Or you can go over here and simply select the files that you want to upload and go from this route as well. Either way, this way is just quicker. And both are good. So, at episode 1, I can call this, let's say episode 1, Finding Your Personality. And then, of course, you can enter the description. You can click on Rich Text Editor if you want to get all fancy. You can do that. But let's just switch to the plain text editor. The rich one allows you to get all fancy, and we're just going to paste this here. And once you're done entering the description, click on Save and Continue. And at this point, what we need to do is upload a file. So I'm going to click on Upload a File. And all we need to do now is just to select the files, maximum 1 gigabyte. Of course, we only have 500 megabytes, but keep in mind that 500 megabytes is still a lot of space. So we're going to go over here. And I'm just using this as an example. But I'm going to select some files. We're going to click this here. And as you can see, it's a 15 megabyte file, but it's uploading fairly quickly. So once this is done, and if you want to upload more files, you can, but in this case, I'm going to say I'm finished uploading. Close this window. And what we need to do now is next select a photo for this episode. 600 by 600 pixels recommended. So what we need to do is select from your media library, enter an image URL, or upload a photo. I'm going to click on Upload a Photo. And once I'm done, click on Save and Continue. And let's choose our tags. Now, the thing that you have to be really careful about with iTunes is if you have anything explicit, like anything that contains explicit language or adult content, you need to check this. If it's clean, you select clean if your episode contains no explicit language or adult content. And you can select none if your episode is appropriate for all audiences. In this case, it's appropriate for all audiences. Just keep in mind that's going to be the review process. If you don't check this and it happens that you have some explicit language in it, then that's going to be an issue later down the road. So you want to make sure that you have it all set correctly. So we can enter the tags here. Now, Podomatic automatically goes ahead and gives you tags, but you can use that, but I'd recommend that you just create your own. So we can say something like finding your personality, and click Save and Continue. So now all we need to do is review it, and then we're good to go. Now, keep in mind you're going to have to do this for every other episode and podcast. So this is episode 1. You can add chapters to this specific episode. Music MP3, it's 192, published with original quality, blah, 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 stream media, downloads, and so forth. So all we need to do is just review the content to make sure that everything looks good. And if it does, click on Save and Continue. So at this point, we're pretty much done. What we need to do is grab the RSS feed, which I'm going to show you how to do in the next video. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is simply to grab our RSS feed for Podomatic. To do that, all you need to do is go to Publish, Podcasts, and Manage. You're going to get to this page. You're going to be able to see your statistics and your tracking and everything like that. That's cool. And if you want more statistics, you can always upgrade to the Pro level. You can get historical data, charts, maps, and more. Now, obviously, RSS feed, that's what we need to get. So it says RSS feed here, right? That's what we need. So click on it, click on copy, and that's it. All right, so I'm going to show you how to submit your RSS feed for your podcast to iTunes. It's super duper easy. All you have to do is download iTunes if you don't already have it. Make sure that you have an account, because you can't do this unless you have an account. At the very top, you're going to see podcasts. Go ahead and click on podcasts. And then once you're at the podcast page, and then underneath podcast quick links, you're going to see submit a podcast. Click on that. And we're pretty much good to go. It says submit podcast to the iTunes directory. Once you do that, all you have to do is copy and paste the URL here. And click continue. And that's it. So congratulations, you've reached the end of this video. Just keep in mind that once you've submitted it, it can take up to just a couple hours, 24 to 48 hours. So generally speaking, it's fairly quick, but just a heads up. Thanks again for watching. Make sure you take action. Otherwise, this knowledge is useless. But as you can see, not very hard at all. Once you create a new episode, you can just repeat the cycle, go back to Podomatic, upload it. It doesn't take more than just a minute. And there you go. That's it. And now you can brand yourself instantly and get yourself loads and loads of targeted traffic.